Okay, so now that this is recording, we may start this interview with Chris Hector, guitarist from the Nautical Doom Metal band Ahab. Well, thanks for being here. We're going to have a quite in-depth interview, I guess, about Ahab as a band, and also with a lot of stuff regarding the Choral Tombs, which is your next album going to be released on the 13th of January, early next year. So, which, as usual, with Ahab, is going to be about another piece of nautical literature. And I'm quite happy as a French person this time, it being about 20 Lieues sous les mers, as we call it in French, which is a famous novel by Jules Verne, as most of you should be aware of. Okay, but again, thanks for being here. And let's start maybe outside of the spectrum of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and the Choral Tombs. Let's start with the very beginning of Ahab as a band. How do you decide to call your band Ahab? While, of course, for people who know your band, everyone knows it all started with Moby Dick, of a novel by Herman Melville, which was adapted in your first album called The Red Sea. But was it because of a specific fancy for Melville that you worked on his first famous book, or other reasons? Why Ahab? Why Moby Dick?
Well, to be honest, this was a mere coincidence because back then I was really into funeral doom, and I happened to read Moby Dick back then, and I was looking for a name for my band, and at that time for my one-man project, and I remember Daniel and me, he had his one-man project too. We were bragging about better names and stuff like that, and it was just one day I came up with, well, Ahab, that's a perfect name for a band, for a funeral doom band. And well, Daniel was a bit jealous of the name because I had a cool name. He didn't have any name, but I was a bit jealous of his song because I didn't have a song back then. I had the concept, and then we were like, oh, come on, let's do it together. And that's when Ahab started. And of course, I had the idea to interpret the novel, and with this mad character of Captain Ahab, it was perfect for making an album, for making a dark album, a slow album. And yeah, it just was kind of coincidence. Ahab was there at the right time for me.
Okay, well, great. That's a good coincidence, and I agree with you. I mean, it fits well the kind of music you've been doing.
Yeah.
And well, it all started with Moby Dick, but then afterwards, in the course of your discography, you've worked with other books, not necessarily novels, but there's been the historical account of the shipwreck of the Essex for your second album, then the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket by Edgar Allan Poe, in 2015 on your last album, The Boats of the Glencarrig, well, the book of the same name by William Hodgson. Well, the link between all these books and, of course, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that you're working on now is, again, the sea. Quite obviously, all these tales, all these stories happen on the ocean. Is that also a coincidence then, or did you just think that writing about novels about the ocean and tales at sea was something that could work, was something that would be great in funeral doom, or is it because you have a specific fancy for such literature or the sea in general?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of the sea and the oceans, it's always kind of mystery. It's both satisfying. It's wondrous. It's dark. It's devilish at times, you know, and you have so much stuff you can interpret into the ocean. I mean, I think I hardly know anyone who's not fascinated of the ocean or of the sea. And on the other hand, we of course had this name Ahab, and we did the first album with the Moby Dick, and well, we thought about how to continue with the band, and at that time, I think I read some books about the origins of Moby Dick, or I don't know if it wasn't books at that time. I think it was just some research I did, and I think I found it on Wikipedia or something like that. These books, and then I ordered them and read them, and many of the Doom community back then was wondering, what will they do next? I mean, what can they do next if they did Moby Dick? And that was the one book. I mean, actually, it's two books. It's In the Heart of the Sea and The Shipwreck of the Essex. I obviously got two books about that. But that was the best option for us to continue with Ahab. And that's when we kind of fixed the nautical theme for us. And I'm not sure if I mean, the term Nautical Funeral Doom was, I think we had it developed on the first album already. So that was something, again, we had like this genre for us, and we didn't want to change genre. And of course, there are so many good books and good novels to read and to interpret. I mean, there are plenty of more nautical books that are really good to interpret.
Yeah, and it's true that today, after 4 albums, it would be weird to see you do something else. I mean, it would definitely be great, but it would feel weird at start, I'm sure. Anyway, so now, as we've said, you're going to release the Call of Tunes, which is adapted from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That's a shift in literature, in the sense that all the present sources that you've used were in English, and well, Jules Verne is French. That's originally a French novel. Well, of course, in France it's extremely famous. Jules Verne is a really famous author here. I don't know, is it the case in Germany or not? Because I may have not mentioned, for anyone unaware, Ahab is banned from Germany.
Yeah, but yes, of course. I mean, Jules Verne is famous everywhere, and I'm a big fan of Jules Verne, actually, and I think everyone, at least at my age, knows the Disney film. I think it's from the 60s or 70s. I think 60s.
It's from 54.
Even from the 50s. Okay, yeah. And I loved it as a kid. It was one of my favorite films back then. So yes, of course, and I mean, everyone knows, for example, what are they called? Voyage au centre de la Terre.
Yeah, the other most famous one, I guess.
Yeah, these are the two famous ones, I think. And I also read some books by him. I don't remember the English, because obviously I read it in German back then. I think one is called Michel Strogoff as well.
Yeah, it's just Progress.
which is Der Kurier des Zaren, and I read that too. So Jules Verne is one of the biggest science fiction authors, so it's not that that surprising that we did Jules Verne at some point.
Yeah, great. And I wanted to ask as well if, well, of course, we could easily imagine that at some point you'd work with Jules Verne, of course. Did that choice come also maybe because of similarities between characters in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea in Moby Dick, with which you've started at the beginning? Because other than the tale at sea, between Ahab and Captain Nemo, there's a shared madness, I'd say, to some extent. Also, between Aronnax and Ismail, there's some kind of will to go into the science and biology of beings living in the ocean.
Yes and no. I don't quite agree that Ahab is as mad as no, the other way around, that Nemo is as mad as Ahab, because I personally think that Nemo actually is a philanthrope that became a misanthrope through civilization and colonialization and stuff like that. So Ahab is for me a bit more sinister, and Nemo is more like a kind of guy that fights the odds of colonialization back then.
Yeah,
so
no, that's true.
It's a bit more, I think. Of course, Moby Dick to some extent is, at least as I read it, it's a little anti-racistic, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea almost is a bit political for me. That's why I love this book so much, because I think it fits quite well in these times nowadays, because colonialization never ended.
Yeah.
Even though many people are more aware of it, but then again, it still happens everywhere.
Well, I agree. Maybe I shouldn't have used the adjective mad or something like that. I mean, both characters are crazy to some extent, but I agree with you that Nemo is more like a benevolent misanthrope or something like that. I mean, he's been wronged by humanity and ended up alone in the ocean and ended up resorting to more violent ways of expression. That is true. But I personally identify a lot with Captain Nemo, so I wouldn't call myself a madman as well.
Yeah, my favorite character is actually Professor Aronnax.
Yeah, I mean, he's amazing as well.
Yeah.
He's the scientist side of things, which also belongs a little in my heart. Okay, great. Well, you've mentioned the movie earlier, so I guess that answers part of my next question. I'm not sure it's quite famous actually in French, but in France, but there's the 1954 Disney movie which you've mentioned, and I wanted to ask if that movie also served to some extent as an inspiration more than just the book. Especially considering some visuals that have been used in the latest clip that you have released for Colossus of the Liquid Graves, in which the Nautilus represented is quite alike the one that you see in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, the movie actually didn't inspire us musically or lyric-wise, but of course you have this imagery in your head, because you've at least me, I've seen it so often when I was a kid, and of course that's something that inspires you for the whole imagery. And I think it's the same with Sebastian Jerke, who did our artwork. And But actually, I think the Nautilus on our cover looks a bit different than the one in the video, and I think that was animation did this one, and that came from them, and I think that was definitely inspired by the film. I would swear it.
We should ask them, but yeah, probably. I mean, I also felt that inspiration. Yeah, well, no wonder if you've enjoyed the movie that a part of it is there visually as well, anyway.
Yeah.
And so that new album is called The Cold Twos. So the reference to the novel in there may be a bit more tricky, especially for people who may not have read it. Tell me if I'm wrong. It feels like it's taken from chapter 24, The Coral Realm, the chapter in which the crew goes to the depths of the ocean to see, they see corals and end up seeing graves made with corals where Captain Nemo buries his mates. I guess it's a reference to that. It is.
Yeah, it is definitely this chapter of the book, and I think that captures the whole book quite good. It's just two lines which I really liked and which just shows what Nemo's all about. And I think Professor Aronnax asks or says, "Your dead sleep quietly, at least, Captain, out of the reach of sharks." And the captain replies, "Yes,
Out of
sharks and men." And that's the book, actually, because I think you get it. And of course, that's what this cover artwork is about, for me at least. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And well, my next question is valid for this album, but for any other as well. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a fairly long book, as is Moby Dick, as has been the novel by Poe. I mean, in any case, it would be hard to put the whole of a novel in one music album, even if Ahab albums are fairly long by metal standards. Of course, it would be impossible to adapt one full novel into one single album. So you have to pick scenes that you want to adapt. How do you do that? How do you pick the most iconic scenes, or those you prefer, or is there an order? How does that work?
It depends. I mean, I'll take a pencil, and this pencil picks at least the most of the parts I'd like to take for the album. And there are two ways to go for a song from a book. The one side is, of course, you go for some of the most iconic scenes, of course. But then again, there are sometimes already some riffs or even some part of the songs already done, and that's when that's when Daniel shows me what the music's all about when he writes a song. And from the feeling I get from this song, I try to find something that fits the song. That's the one way. The other way around is I read the book and I have this pencil with me, and if I read something that just sticks in my mind, I just underline it, and later on, in a second reading process, I look just for these sections I have and put them on paper, and then I see what these parts are all about. And sometimes I also take parts from this chapter and from that chapter and from another third chapter, and I put these together to depict a picture of Nemo, for example, or what he's all about and stuff like that. So that's that's the other side. And then I give Daniel probably just a title, sometimes just some fragments. This is what it's all about, and then he writes another song, or the same with me. I write another song about this. So yes, that's how it all develops. It's two sides.
Okay, and once you've selected the parts you want to specifically work on, you have to come up with lyrics as well that would encapsulate whatever is in the chapter you want to work with. Is that hard as well? Do you use some of the words that appear in the novel as well, or do you rephrase stuff? How do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I use whole parts, but I rewrite them, for example, to rhyme. Most of my lyrics read more like poems or something like that if you just read them. And I like to rhyme because that's a bit of a challenge, of course, but I think it just reads better and there's some kind of flow in it. Yeah, and of course you have to, like, you can't use all the words from the book. You just take some parts of it, and some parts probably are almost the same. So that's how I write my lyrics then.
Thanks. That's great. And I agree with the poem part. It sounds more musical as well. I personally enjoy a lot of poetry anyway, so I'm already convinced. I agree. I agree with that point. So, well, continuing with the cool tunes. As of yet, we're on the 13th of December, exactly 1 month away from the release. We've had the public has had 2 singles, which I'd like to talk about a little. The first one that you have released is, well, the first track of the album, Proper Renax Descent into the Vast Oceans, which was a nice surprise because at the beginning, this kind of black metal intro, when you have a guest who's on that song, singer from Alpha, which is also, I'm a big black metal guy and I enjoy Alpha as well. And well, the video clip was really, 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 really great. And everyone who knows me knows that I really love fish. And whenever there's fish, I'm happy. So this first song is, if I'm not mistaken, but the first encounter between Aronnax and Captain Nemo once he's aboard the Abraham Lincoln, his ship. And well, they encounter the Nautilus, which they mistake for a possible beast of some kind, attack, and they get thrown thrown in the water. And that's what this is all about at the beginning. You've made a video clip for those who haven't seen it, which is a mashup of extracts of aquatic species. There's fish, there are crustaceans, jellyfish, and stuff. I think I've read in the description of the video that you've made it yourself, if I'm not mistaken. Were there any specific choices in terms of species that you wanted to add there? Was it more or less random? How did you pick what fish appeared there?
Okay. Yes, you're right. It's the first part of, I mean, the black metal part is, of course, when they go overboard and it's like going underwater and stuff like that. And I think that's something that fits perfect this high pace we're going at that point. And yes, you're also right that the next part, when everything's calm, that's the Professor Aronnax seeing all these wondrous things which he longed for probably all of his life, and now he gets it. I mean, for a price, of course. If I leave, it means death. Yes, and why did I choose them? On the one hand, I once studied biologies and I wanted to become a marine biologist. It didn't work out, but I'm happy with what I'm doing now. And yes, I mean, you're right. These are all stock videos because everything else would be way too expensive. I just wanted to, of course, I wanted to have jellyfish because they're weird creatures, and it just fits the music, and it fits the wondrous depth. Other than that, I try to, if you take the lyrics and read along and look at the pictures, I tried somehow to fit the imagery to the lyrics. I mean, with stock footage, it's not that easy, but I tried. And yeah, that's how I picked the video scenes. It's not about like this species or that species. It just has to fit the words for me. And for me, these creatures I found do the job.
Yeah, I mean they do, and these stock videos are really looking great. So the video itself is really good. And as you've mentioned, the diversity of species is also there to showcase the character of Aronnax as he is a scientist who is extremely interested in whatever could be there. He is the character in novel that's mostly interested in just discovering stuff under the sea, and who is mesmerized by Captain Nemo and everything he knows about this sea. And well, the video works well in both ways: the aggressiveness at the beginning because of the collision, and then just Aronnax being who he is, a scientist and just a curious guy.
Yeah.
Okay, and well, so that was the first single, and you've released a few days ago a second single for the second track of the album, which is Colossus of the Liquid Grace, which is stylistically way different. It's a video in stop motion, which to me seems to be a mix of video footage, seems to be a mix of elements from the choral realm. And also a chapter late in the book, the devilfish in which they encounter the giant squid and have to fight it off. Tell me, of course, if I'm mistaken. But I wanted to ask as well, why the choice of stop motion? I know you've mentioned in the description of the video that it's something that you've always wanted to do for the band. It works wonders. I love this, and I generally enjoy stop motion anyway. It reminds me of movies by Henry Selick. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Like the movie Coraline.
Yes.
He did a few stop motion movies, and it reminded me a bit of that style. I don't know if that has such movies have been an inspiration. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I know Coraline. I didn't know the guy who did the film, but I really liked Coraline as well. It was another great weird film, children's film, and no, but actually, the main inspiration for this little film was Tool. I love Tool videos. They're so dark and yes, you're right. Again, about the story concept of the video, and we thought about what can we do, and of course we needed to do a video that depicts a bit more of the book, and we just thought we have to do our cover artwork, and yes, and about stop motion, I just love this special mood that stop motion has. It's so weird in a way, so kind of children's stuff, but then again somehow sinister and devilish. I can't describe it, but I think it just fits perfect to dark music.
Well, I agree. And so you said that you want to show more of a book, and I mean, that's true. So combining characters, one that's more or less well closer to the beginning of the book, the other one that's closer to the end. And also I'd say that maybe the scene with the giant squid is maybe one of the most iconic of the novel as well. It's probably the most iconic of the movie as well.
Of course, it wasn't underwater, the scene with the giant squid, but then again, I mean,
it works in the video.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the other hand, since that scene is more like at the end of the book, is it a problem somewhere if it's more at the beginning of the album? Are you trying to go towards something chronological? Not necessarily.
Well, we thought about that. I mean, it's always difficult. I think the other albums are more or less all chronological. But then again, this time we thought, I mean, there are some songs that don't really matter where they are on the album. For example, for me, Mobilis in Mobili, which is a song I wrote, is more about the concept of Nemo overall. So it doesn't have this one place in the book or on the album. And yes, other than that, we listened to the songs and we just chose. I mean, of course, you have to put Professor Aronnax at the first place, and you have to do the Maelstrom the last place. And I mean, it's more or less chronological, but not that strict.
Okay, great. So moving on, Since the album hasn't been released yet, of course, I'm not going to give any specifics to anyone right now because people will discover it once it's released. But still, can you tell a bit of what listeners should expect? There's a bit that people can know if they read the novel, in the sense that some of the titles of the songs are actual titles from chapters. That's true for Mobilis in Mobili. That's true for Egri Somnia as well. The Maelstrom, of course, refers to the end. That's fairly obvious. Uh, but still, considering also we've had a bit of a black metal surprise at the beginning of the album, we also know, even if we haven't heard the song yet, that at the end of the album there's another guest from Esoteric that is appearing, if I'm not mistaken. Um, what should people expect?
Well, I mean, that's a hard question. What should people expect? I mean, I hope that if you read the book and afterwards hear the album, you get some connection and think, that's this picture I had in mind and that fits perfectly well, or the other way around, which is even a bigger compliment for us. If people read the lyrics, listen to the music, or just listen to the music and want to read the novel afterwards, that would be great. And of course, I mean, you can expect, for me, the most important scenes, the most important themes from the book. And of course, there's always some personal stuff that you bring in, some personal thoughts. Of course, some personal interpretations of stuff, which probably someone other would interpret in a total different way. That's okay for me. Yeah, I mean, the heart of this book is, as I said, it's some kind of being just, being upright, and some, at that time, anti-colonial, if you will. And yeah, that's what I like about Nemo, because I mean he does some not that nice things, but then again he's some kind of freedom fighter or something like that, if you will. Yeah, and that's what the essence of this book is for me, besides Professor Aronnax and the science. And I really love science.
Thanks. Well, I agree with all of that. I mean, and I guess I'm sure that's something that talks to a lot of readers of that novel, both the science stuff on one side, and of course the anti-colonial on the other, which was, I think I should read more about that, but I think it was part of the intent of the author initially, anyway. So it's meant to be there.
Yeah.
You've mentioned something that reminded me about another question I had in mind. Considering that, well, you're making music that's initially taken from books, did you write this music with the intent, or at least the idea, that maybe it can help people who listen to the music who may not have read these books to go to them, to go to the books, or are you not thinking about it that much?
No, I don't think we that's our intention. Our intention is, of course, to do music and to bring stories to the listeners. But if someone's not into reading and doesn't want to read and just thinks Ahab is another doom band, that's fine as well. Of course, it's always nicer, as this interview, for example, it's nicer to talk to someone who's into it and who knows what I'm talking of and who has the same mindset, for example, than just like some rock and roll or metal interview. That's okay too, but that's not that nice as talking to someone who's into it. So no, I don't think we try to tell people read more, but they should read more.
I mean, if it can be used as a grid towards literature, I mean, that's great. Of course, people are not obliged to read stuff, to read old big books if they don't want to, of course. But if at least that can spark a bit of curiosity and just check what it's about, I mean, that's already great. Anyways, let's move on. So, as we said, you've worked with a lot of books yet. You've mentioned earlier that, well, there's lots of books about the sea and adventures on the ocean that exist. There are lots of them. Of course, every album you need to think about another book to work on. There's lots of other classics that you could work with. Some that have been worked on in metal music already, like The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which was adapted by Iron Maiden. We could mention also the Odyssey, which was worked on by Symphonics. There's a lot of other books like The Old Man and the Sea, The Pilot, other novels from Herman Melville, because more or less all of them are on the sea. Um, are there others that you've had in mind but haven't had the opportunity to adapt yet?
Yeah, I mean, we had of course we tried to do some other books in the last 7 years, but it didn't work out. There were some. I think we had 2 books. I had this idea to do about the slave ships that took the African people to the American continent, and I tried to find some books about it, and I found 2. One was more like documentation, which is hard to interpret musically. The other one was just a bad book. It didn't click. I didn't like it. So that would be really interesting because with all this African heritage, you could have done something very interesting musically. But it didn't work out. So yes, and of course there are some books like the German book Das Boot. I'm not sure if it's Le Bateau in French. I don't think so.
I'm not that good with German literature, so I'm not sure I know about it.
Wait a minute. It's from a German guy called Lothar Günther Buchheim, and in French it's called Le Styx or Le Bateau.
Okay, well, I'll look it up. That could be interesting.
Yeah, it's maybe the Second World War. It's quite dark, not too nice, but it's a great kind of anti-war film and anti-war book.
Okay, interesting. Interesting. Well, I'm going to follow up with a question that you started replying. So let's do it right now. You haven't yet worked on German literature, and well, you've just mentioned a German book. As I've said, I'm not that good with German literature. I mean, I've read a few classic German books like Tales from the Grimm Brothers, stuff like Goethe or Nietzsche, but I've never actually learned German, so I'm not that good with German literature and stuff. I only know a few classics, as I said. But as you've mentioned, there has to be examples of German nautical fiction that maybe you could work with. Are there any others?
Well, nautical stuff. The only thing that comes to my mind is Das Boot, and this. I really like that book, and I read it quite some times, and I saw the film. which is a big thing in Germany, actually. This film still, there are still some. Probably you will find a French version of it.
Yeah, I'll look it up. I'll look it up. It seems interesting. Thanks. Apart from German books, let's go back to French stuff. First, just mentioning that your third album, The Giant, is, as mentioned, it's based on the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket by Edgar Allan Poe. And it so happens that Jules Verne was a big fan of that novel and has written, in French, its title is Le Sphinx des Glaces. I don't know the German title. The English title is An Antarctic Mystery. I mean, now that you're into Verne, is that something that you could work on next? Like kind of like a follow-up to The Giant? Or
actually, we thought about that back then, but I read the book and I didn't really like it. Not sure. Probably I should give it a try again, but I don't think we'll do that as a follow-up for The Giant. I think we have to move further to further south.
doubtful. Oh, Father, hear our mournful sighs.
And I know, well, it's probably too early to ask, but did you have other books other than 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that you were thinking on, like right now, when making a new album, that you might do next?
Well, it's too early to talk about that, but I have an idea at least, and this goes a bit more into science actually, not science fiction. Of course, it will be a bit science fiction because otherwise you can't tell a story just with science, but that's something that spooks in my head right now. And we'll see what happens. I don't know yet if we're going to do that, but I'm really excited about that.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to it whenever that happens. Okay, So we're going to fairly quickly reach the end of this discussion, I think. Next, let's talk a bit about your music as a genre, what you call the Nautical Doom Metal. It's something that I've been a lot into. I mean, I love the sea in any form of art and also, of course, in nature. And I've actually worked on depictions of the sea in metal music back when I was in my master's degree. And I've noticed, and maybe you have too, that uh, it feels like there's more and more bands that either are specifically focusing on the sea and nautical themes or releasing albums that are related to the sea here and there. Like recently, we could mention the last Ancestrum album, Elastic. There's, of course, in terms of famous stuff, there's Leviathan by Mastodon, but there's lots of bands which obviously talk about the sea, like Giant Squid. There's Squalus, which is specifically a sludge band about Jaws. There's the Ocean Collective, Sunken, Drone, Devil's Wings, so many bands like that. While maybe a few years ago we could have referred to you maybe as a niche, like nautical metal, not necessarily doom, but nautical metal as a really small niche. Would you say it's something that's becoming an actual more widespread subgenre of metal now?
Well, ooh, that's hard. I mean, I'm of course I know some of the bands like The Ocean, of course, and Mastodon, but many of the other bands I didn't ever hear of. Probably, of course, Enziferum, but this is for me. I know them from back in the days, and these were more like the folks metal guys with swords and stuff like that. But I mean, yes, from time to time, some bands write us that we inspired them to do a band, and this is so probably yes, but then again, I mean, the sea is so omnipotent, and I think there are so many bands that did something about the sea or like the depth or stuff like that. So, but I think I had to do some more research to see if that's a real subgenre. I mean, some people, of course, do jokes about it. Well, this all nautic metal and stuff like that, but I'm not sure if this is a genre. Probably in 10 years or something like that. Probably.
Yeah,
There's a new genre.
possibly. I mean, of course, today there's not as many albums about the seas than there are albums about the forest, but to some extent it's a similar process in terms of being willing to represent aspects of nature.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. Probably we're called proto-nautic metal in 30 years or something like that.
Maybe yes. From the research I've done on that topic, there's really a lot of bands doing that, but the vast majority of them are really small bands. So for now, it's still really small, but maybe if all goes well, going to be widespread sometime in 10 years, as you said. Yeah. We'll see. Anyway, so let's get to the very last question of this interview, which is just for fun, and just to have something more to chill out more at the end. Again, thanks for being here. I mean, I'm personally a big fan, so of course I'm happy to just talk to you. You're going to release an album, so maybe we can expect you to play a few shows here and there, maybe a small tour. So feel free to tour. I'd love to see you. I've never seen you actually, and I'd love to. I don't know if you come often to France. I live in Dijon if needed. Do you have any plans?
Well, at the moment, of course, we have some plans, but there's nothing that I can announce yet besides 2 concerts we will do in Germany. But everything else is still in works, or we already are booked, but are not allowed to yet announce it for some festivals. But what I can say, we will try to do more festivals next year than club shows. But then again, I'm not sure if that works out or if we'll do some small. But of course, France is on the list as well. We would love to come to France again. And I think we already had an offer for France, but I think the date just didn't fit, and we had to say sorry, not next year, probably the year after. So
yeah. Well, we'll see. I really hope to be able to catch you someday.
Yeah, we'll be in France. I'm pretty sure next year's.
That'd be great. Thanks. So now that this is the end, I know, is there anything else you'd like to say? Anything else, whatever it is that you would like to add to this discussion?
Merci beaucoup. And
thanks
for having me. That was really a nice interview and interesting interview. And thank you for your research. Perfect.
Well, thank you for your music. I mean, I wouldn't be here without that, so it all goes to you. Really, thanks a lot. And well, hoping to see you again whenever possible.
In Dijon?
In Dijon, if possible. We have a really nice place that's run by the local punk scene that I'm sure you'd like. Anyway, thanks again, and well, see you next time.
Thanks. Take care, mate.